Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast. I am your host, Miel Fox, and I have a lovely guest today. I'm beyond excited for my guest today. We have Nicole Birkholzer visiting with us. She is an animal communicator and behavior expert, an author, a podcaster, and a ceramist making carving her own custom work. So I'm really excited because, as you all know, I believe in all things energy, and I believe that we all have the capacity to tap into the greatness of our intuition, our soul, our higher self, and receive messages. That being said, I also believe that we receive information through various mediums and channels. I don't mean mediums, I mean through different modalities. So, you all know I'm big into numerology and numbers and all about the energy in the quantum field. Nicole, with her expertise in animal behavior and animal communication, was so kind to jump in and have a visit with me over the weekend to have a chat with some of my companions, my furry companions. And she said to me, I really don't know why I'm here. They don't know why I'm here because they say you're already tuned in and you can hear them just great. But what was really interesting is I said, well, I'd really like an unbiased take on this because our human always seems to get in the way with our higher self. And there's this little internal battle. So without further ado, I'm going to pick Nicole's brain a little bit, but I'd love to welcome her to the show and we'll just chat a little bit. Energy
Hell,
and animals.
Hey guys, you're listening to the Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast, where we talk about uncaging your divinely gifted wild heart to be as free and expansive as you were born to be. My goal is to use our stories, guest interviews, and your questions to tease out what has been keeping your wild heart under wraps. I'm your host, Miel Fox, and together we will shatter the myths of our old stories to set our wild heart free. So thanks for choosing you and showing up today.
Hi.
oh my God, hello, Miel. I'm so excited to be here. I really am and especially because I got to hang out with you and a couple of your furries yesterday, which was just such a treat. And especially that they were, before we even got started, that they were like, she's great at this. Why do we need you? I can't make it up. It's too funny.
They are so funny. So I'm just so curious. I believe so strongly in several things that, of course, the listeners, if they're the regulars, are like, oh, here she goes again. I believe there are no coincidences. I believe that our souls, when they come to Earth here, 3D, whether you show up as a furry animal or a reptile or a human, that is the path for this lifetime. And there will be interactions that occur, whether that's animal to animal or human to animal. And to me, it's soul to soul. So I sort of strip what does it look like on the outside and get down to the nitty gritty of these are soul beings having conversation. I love that you have honed in on the capacity to help people understand what the messages are through their companions, their furry companions or feathered companions or whatever that may be. What led you to this? What was that place for you in your journey where you said, ah, this is my passion, how I need to show up, what I want to do?
Well, I think it all really started just with the passion of and the love for animals. I grew up in Germany. My parents decided not to have any animals. This was a responsibility they were not interested in taking on. And so I was always the child that glommed onto everybody else's animals. And not just the basics, like my grandparents had always German shepherds, or a neighbor might have had a horse that I was curious about. But I was literally at the local farm where we got milk and potatoes. And I would be the kid that is on the tractor with the farmer and the two, teenage sons. And I was probably 9 or something. And I would drive out into the pasture with them where they were milking the cows. And I don't know if you remember these old metal scraper, like the circular scrapers, and I would be the one scraping the cow patties off the cows while they got milked. And the guys are all like, what the heck is she doing? And I don't know. I just felt like, of course they would want that. This is all stuck together fur. Who wouldn't want that all cleared up, right? So I just kept finding opportunities to be around animals and eventually had a horse that I got to lease as a teenager. And it was one of those crazy situations. By the time school got too much and I got out of horses for a minute, my whole family was like, "Oh my God, we were just thinking about getting you one." And I'm like, oh my God, I wanted a horse all my life. And now, I mean, oh my God. So, but that was really my love and passion. But honestly, back then, they did not communicate with me the way they do now. They did more what we all, I think, experience as children, where we just have a knowing. I knew if the dog didn't feel well, or I knew that the cow would feel well. And so it was back in those days still the innate part of love and connection with animals. And then, of course, we get domesticated and we learn how to ride a horse. And, the goal is not to have a super duper connection, but have good form and, maybe win some ribbons or whatnot. And that all felt like, ugh, to me. And so I eventually moved to New York City and volunteered at a therapeutic riding center. And that connected me back with horses in particular in a way that was meaningful. And then eventually, a therapeutic riding horse out in Massachusetts was the first animal I heard. And that's when everything changed for me in my life.
So when you say that this horse was the first animal you heard, could you share how you feel for you? How did that awareness feel to you differently than, oh, I know when the dog doesn't feel right and know when the cow feels good? That sort of what we like to call claircognizance, which is you just know. You don't know how you know, you just know. But what I hear you say is I actually heard a communicated message from this horse.
Yeah, it came totally out of the blue, which I think is often when we start having intuitive hits. That's what I call it, where something just hits you literally. That often happens, I think, that it comes as a surprise. And back then, I was the director of a therapeutic riding center. We were short volunteers, 5 o'clock, or last lesson, 4 o'clock. I was leading this horse Buddy, and we were walking along, and he touched my hand with his nose at one moment, at a certain moment. And I just innately just said to him, "What's up, Buddy?" And he said, "I'm done." And I, as if this was the most normal thing, I looked at my watch and I said, "Oh, we got 10 more minutes, and today's your day off, tomorrow is your day off. So let's just kind of suck it up, buttercup, and keep on going." And he did this sigh and kept on walking. And I went, "What just happened? What was that?" And I heard him so clearly that he was just so done for the day. I mean, that's such a hard job for horses to be a therapeutic riding horse. And I was like, oh my God. And that set me on the trajectory to learn from some animal communicators, some energy people who were working with chakras, energy work, pendulums, different things. And I was fascinated for years. And I would go every couple of years to another class, and I would be like, "Oh, this is just fascinating." And sometimes I got good information, and sometimes it was a little bit of a doozy. And but I never thought about it more. And eventually I switched teams, I always call it. I became an advocate for therapy horses and created an equine wellness expo with alternative healers coming to work with horses and teach people in the community about that. And I was like, this is really my passion, helping horses, helping animals. And then one of the teachers I had came to my neighborhood, and I was like, let me just do another animal communication class. And she had a program where she offered where you do 60 case studies, meaning not just randomly kind of tuning in, but it's like 1 o'clock, like us yesterday, right? It was 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Be tuned in and see what comes through. And I did this, and I got my case studies done within, I think, a couple of weeks because I knew so many people and I had a lot of people who wanted me to do this work with them and their horses and cats and birds. And so I just, before I knew it, was certified. And then more and more people came and more and more people came. And suddenly I was like, oh, I guess that's my job now. I didn't really pick it. It was more like it picked me because there was a demand. And I think I have a particular knack for it because I personally came to this country not speaking English. And so the first 3 months being in New York City, I was so misunderstood. It wasn't even funny. And so I think I realized what it takes to really observe somebody, to tune into somebody, because that was my only way to communicate, even with people, to read their faces, to read the energy that came off them. So I really feel that I get it when an animal wants to say something and nobody understands what they mean. So for me, it's almost a little bit of a personal journey that extended onto the animals.
Yeah. Oh, this is it's so fascinating to me. And of course I have all kind of sciencey questions to ask you. But what I really hear as you're telling your story is one, very open to trying something that is perhaps just not your norm, but hey, why not? Let's give it a whirl. So that piece of curiosity I think is very important as we all of us try to find what is our passion, what is our purpose, what is our place of service, how do we need to show up, and does it need to be a business, or is it just that this fulfills my heart and gives me joy and bliss? So I think that piece of it is interesting, that you just sort of follow these breadcrumbs without questioning, oh, is this the right thing, is this not the right thing? You just did the thing. So the lesson behind that is the release and surrender, to trust that what needs to come through will come through with some inspired consistent action steps along the way. So I love that you share this story in this way. And I also so appreciate that your awareness of what many people don't quite understand, or some perhaps they do, but for example, these therapy horses, from a human perspective, we lean on them to provide a service for other humans who need a little assistance, need a little help in some way, whether that's physically, emotionally, psychologically, whatever that may be. The horses are stepping in through the benevolence of how they are structured energetically to serve in a way that really helps the client. But the piece that I think sometimes does get ignored, which I'm just so grateful that you're talking about this, is the amount of dedication and giving from the animal's perspective to facilitate their job of helping the human, oftentimes I think does get overlooked. And years ago, none of these additional modalities that are available now were mainstream. So now we have, horse osteopathy, we have horse related myofascial work, we have various, horse reiki and chakra rebalancing work. So to me, the animal communication piece is just another energetic exchange extension of how do we communicate. The messages come through in whatever dialogue one needs to hear it, whether that's, the planets, the numbers, verbal, just that energetic exchange and emotion. And so I really value that you have found. You sort of found the golden key here that is helping these animals to unlock a piece of their being so that not only can they certainly be in service to we as the humans, which is obviously we've domesticated the horse. There you go.
Mm.
But by opening our awareness of how we are not just 3D blobs, how we are truly energetic beings, we can now open this entire line of communication with other species within our world, which I think, I'm not going to say it didn't exist previously, but I don't think we really talked about it mainstream like we do now.
Yes. And I think it's like what you were saying about the soul. We come into this world, each of us, as the animals always say, we're consciousness embodied. That's how animals describe it. And right, there's a vessel that we bring our soul or consciousness to when we get on this trip around Mother Earth here. And each of us have a journey. And yet, I think sometimes we as humans forget about the journey the animals also have. And the journey may be that of a service animal, right? But we often forget, I think, what that also means for them. And if I'm thinking of therapy horses in particular, to me, that horse is generally the hardest working horse, because we could say, oh, but a racehorse is really a hard working horse. Yeah, but the racehorse has a very balanced person on their back that does not have unexpected behaviors or unexpected motions around. A Certainly a carriage horse in the city has a very hard job, but it is also relatively predictable. And on top of it, every one of these horses has their human. A therapy horse doesn't have a human. A therapy horse lives in a barn where he or she has probably between 5 and 15 people engaging every day with the horse. And so these horses often come out of somebody's backyard, right? It could be you donate your horse to a rescue. That horse has known nothing but Miel's backyard. And yet then suddenly it ends up in a program where nobody really cares on a deep level of familiar, right? The family familiar. And so for me, the biggest part of my work always was to share with the staff and the volunteers to say, when you work together with this horse, just like me and Buddy that day when he nudge, and it's like, I'm done. I was his advocate. I was his person in that moment. And how can I teach you to be that person for these horses while you're engaging? And to me, that is really, really important, because we so often, I feel, take from the animals, and not just horses, dogs, very similar. We take, but we don't really know how to give. And the not knowing how to give is something I can certainly help with by saying, this horse, all he or she wants is to be always in the same paddock every night, so that he always has his home and always knows where he can put his rest his head, right? Or I can share how a dog is really needing companion in order to feel not so lonely all day at home. Or a cat who says, I sure don't want a kitten, because if you bring a kitten home and I need to raise a kitten, then I'm not getting all the attention I want from you, my human. And so for me, the gift here is really that we get to understand and know and learn to see the world through the animal's eyes, and therefore can share an even deeper connection and a much deeper communication and understanding, so that the animals are truly seen and heard for what they need. Not just us, right? We all want to be seen and heard. But let me tell you, animals are not standing behind behind that. They want to be seen and heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a very interesting observation. There's a universal law of reciprocation. It's basically the law of give and receive. And I think many times I like to refer to myself as an animal guardian companion versus an owner, because I don't feel like I own possess that kind of phraseology. And I realize it's just semantics and words, but to me, it matters. I view it as it's a connection, it's a relationship, it's an exchange of everything. It's an exchange of love, it's an exchange of ideas, it's an exchange of physical proximity. It's all of it. And so to me, it's more, it just has a different idea to me than an ownership. But my point being, I will say early on in my animal education, when I first started with horses, I started as an adult. I didn't know anything. I did not have the availability to be around or with horses as a child. I did something similar though. I would ride my bike to the next town over from where we lived. It was a little farm stand, and they, grew their vegetables, and they had a little tiny Shetland pony thing out in the back paddock there. And of course, all little girls love horses. That's just how it is. And I remember the farm owner saying, "Well, if you can get on and ride, sure, go ahead." Well, I would spend hours and hours, hours standing on a rock, kind of begging this horse to come by and visit with me. And I did manage to climb up one day as a young child, and I came off a little faster than I got on, I'll say. But it didn't mean anything. I was like, that's okay. I can do it. It's okay. This is now, I just took it as a challenge. I can do this. And it wasn't until, oh, I would say it was probably almost a decade into my real horse time, where, and like I learned the riding and the showing and all the things, and push this button if you want them to do this, and push this button if you want them to do that. And I thought to myself, this isn't right. This just doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't just, I mean, I don't like it when someone tells me do this and do this and do this and doesn't ever say thank you, and doesn't ever, just say, come have a cup of tea with me, or oh, whatever you want to call it. And so I actually walked away from the riding and the showing and all the things. And I just started down the path of, how do I learn to quote unquote speak to them in a
Yeah.
way that is understandable. And of course, years later, I realized, oh, isn't this interesting that, these horses have this gigantic electromagnetic field, and that their heart resonance is huge compared to humans. And what they're able to sense and feel and integrate is huge compared to humans. And yet we think our little hundred and some odd pound humanness is getting up on their 1,000 pound whatever. And, we're running the show. And
And
the
we're in
reality
charge.
is, and we're in charge. I mean, that's probably to me the most laughable piece of the whole thing. Like, you're fooling yourself if you think that's what's going on. It is by the grace of love, kindness, and compassion that they say, sure, you can come on up and let's go do this thing. And so I am just so grateful and appreciative for people like yourself who are mindful and aware in the moment of where these conscious beings are, and how to convey that information to the people who spend their time with them. So here's my sciencey question for you. I have always been curious as to whether people in animal communication fields, do they visualize? Do they receive an image, a picture, and then interpret that into our given language? Does it come through as a feeling, like a sensation that is then interpreted? And I'm curious, and I realize it probably varies person to person, but for you specifically, and you don't need to give all your secrets away, but does it come through to you as when you said the buddy said, I'm done? I mean, do you actually hear I'm done, or do you have that feeling that you clearly translate into I'm done?
Those were literally the words I heard. And I think that's why it shocked me so much and shocked me into my response, because it was so true, as if you were saying to me, you know what, Nicole, I'm done. And I would look at my clock and say, like, well, yeah, we got a couple more minutes. It was that clear. In the meantime, though, I would say all of my senses, they are the senses, and then there are the finer senses, right? You already referred to clairvoyant, clairsentient, and everything but smelling. Smelling, for me to smell something is extremely rare. It's usually not something that happens to me. I do most of my work over the phone. And so I
Mhm.
have a photo of the animal in front of me. And so I rarely smell anything. But I can tell you that sometimes before a session, I will suddenly feel like I have an upset stomach, and I will sit down, go through my little balancing ritual to make sure that I'm in balance and that I can actually lend my body to the animal. And then I always go check and I'm like, is this me? Is this my belly or is this my stomach? Is there something going on? And I will usually get a no. And with that, I already know we need to look at the animal's stomach, for example. Or when I look at the photo is really for me more a focus point, but sometimes, especially when I see the entire body, I will notice that my eye is drawn to a particular body part and I just keep on looking at it. And, it's almost like I see the whole thing and then I'm honing in on the hip. I'm honing in on the hip. And at that point, I go back to my body and I'm like, oh, yeah, I can feel a tightness in the right hip. So it's a feeling, a transfer of information that comes literally through the body. I also sometimes get pictures where, like yesterday, I had a client and it was cute. They were wondering if the dog liked the lake house where they go to. And I saw the dog jumping out of the car and I saw pine needles everywhere, pine needles. And she put her little paws into the pine needles and was like, ooh, this feels so good. And the people were like, oh my God, we have pine trees everywhere and there's pine needles everywhere. That was a visual. And later on, she showed me, they asked me if she liked the beach. And the first thing that came up, which is like such a wild visual for me, I was kind of like, what is that again? And I'm like, oh, a horseshoe crab. And I saw the shape of it. So for me, it can come in all different variations. But honestly, the funnest part for me is when they give me words because for some reason I think the animals know that I'm a writer and they sometimes pull out words that I say, well, I literally go like, let me look that word up. I don't even exactly know what that word means, but they literally tell me, look it up, it's important. And then when I read it and I tell the person, we realize how specific an animal can be about a word. And I'm learning from them that so many words we use kind of, and it's, I wish I could think, maybe I'll think of a word that is typical, but where we feel like it has a meaning. And like the word attitude, for example, is one of those, right? We think attitude is a little bit of a negative. Usually it has that connotation, oh, she has an attitude. But then if they were to ask me to look up the word attitude, we would learn that there is a specific meaning when one has such an attitude. And then that leads to the specific need or expression that the animal wanted to convey. So I get a kick out of it when they use words because me and words are marriage. And so I think the animals know that I love it.
I think that's terrific. It's amazing to me. And the other piece that I find very, very interesting is how clear the messaging comes through that reminds us to look within ourselves. So I'll just give the overview, and I haven't told you this yet, but so we had our visit with a few of my pals yesterday, and a lot of times I hear information in the moment, but I absolutely am one of those personalities where I hear it, but then it sort of settles and it goes a little deeper and it kind of integrates a little bit better over time. And oftentimes I will suddenly have this, aha, where I've taken all the separate pieces and then put them all together. So I had this last night after our session. Of course, it was bitterly cold here, so I spent a lot of time just doing barn work, getting everybody situated and settled for the evening. And I went to bed and I woke up mm, probably in the middle of the night with the thought of, oh, Isn't this interesting? Here we go again. And then this morning, I actually journaled about it. So isn't this interesting? Here we go again. This is the energy piece of this. I firmly believe, just as I believe that all souls show up as they're meant to, all these conscious beings come through in whatever form, shape they're meant to be here. I also believe that all of our soul contracts, our interactions that we have in our lives, whether it's human to human, animal to animal, or human to animal, I I think it's there not only to give and receive lessons, which to me is all about that universal law of reciprocation, but also to remind us or reflect to us areas within our human selves that still needs our attention. So a lot of us say, "Oh, I've done my healing journey and I've healed and I resolved all those old stories and I let go of X, Y, and Z," and whatever that may be for each individual. But we all know usually it shows up quite a few times in your lifetime because there's another nuance of the lesson that needs to be addressed. There's another piece of the shadow work that needs to be exposed. You don't get to have light without dark, dark without light. I mean, the two are, duality is just the way it is. But I thought it was so interesting because I woke up this morning and I really thought about the information you shared with me from each of the three that we chatted with. And the lesson came home so clearly to me. Oh, well, this is a reminder about your, meaning my old story of, and then fill in the blank. And I thought, isn't this interesting that this particular animal has been brought into my world? And here I am thinking, oh, I'm giving you a home and I'm taking care of you and I'm doing all the things. And yep, I love you dearly. But truth be told, the lesson is there because there's work that I still need to do from within for me, and they are facilitating that. So I'm so grateful for that. And in return, I feel that when I become aware of these areas to work on within myself, I can now become the mirror for them so that they can now let go and resolve some of these held beliefs.
Goosebumps.
Mm,
Goosebumps.
hmm. Yeah.
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 I have oh my God, like it's going up all the way to the top of my head. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And how
And
beautiful that you actually reflect on that, because I call animals the guide by our side, because I feel our animals, and this is not something we're asking of them, right? Earlier we talked about that we ask a lot of the animals. I think by nature they are, and this is talk about science, right? This is like takes the woo-woo right out of it, which makes it less magical, but I think this is really important for us to also understand. Animals in a pack, right? That would be cats or dogs, or in a flock with birds, or in a herd with horses. They have dynamics, pack dynamics, herd dynamics that are made for survival. That's just the way the science works, right? If a horse, and I have actually a wild horse who is out of the North Dakota prairie, it's not a Mustang, it's actually a horse out of the war pony line of Sitting Bull. So he is here. He's never worn a halter in his life. He takes care of his own feet. I just feed and water him, so to speak. Water him. He does not want anything taken care of. And that was my deal with him. But so I've spent a good amount of time out in the wild with those horses, and also to find the horse that would be a good match for our herd. And every herd or pack has an order, and we always think of like the hierarchical of, like the top dog or the top horse and the alpha and the one who pushes the other one's feet, or pushes the other one, whoever moves their feet first. Yeah, that is one line. But what I think is much more important is the horizontal, not just the vertical line of order, but the horizontal one where each has their own job. And you probably know this from your herd if you watch them right? One is the surveyor who's always having an eye on everything. One is the grounder. One is the energy balancer. One is the container. Depending on how many animals or horses in particular you have, some have several roles because, if you only have three, but there are 5, 7, 8 roles, right? They need to share. And in my opinion, it's that, and it's not my opinion, that's the science, it's that when one is vulnerable, the others need to step up. I have right now a horse, she is vulnerable, she has a hoof condition going on. The others need to step up to look out because she cannot do her job as well. And animals by nature want ease. They always seek ease. They never not look for ease. If you look at your cat, she always finds the sunny spot. Your dog in the summer finds the cool spot under the deck. The animal nature is such that they would never put themselves into unease on purpose. We do that to them. They never do it to themselves. Yet we as humans create unease through our mind that goes into the future and into the past like mad. So when we are weak because we are not balanced, because we are obsessing about something in the future, because we are worrying about something that happened in the past that we wish we could have changed, we are creating a weakness within this family structure. And that means that our animals are like, knock, knock, knock. Hello. Time to change and come back into the present moment where ease can be found. And so when you say that you got an insight through this session yesterday, it's basically the guide by your side having pointed out something that still needs some attention, right? Where you can still either let something go or embrace something or whatever it is to be more at ease. Because the moment you're at ease, everybody takes a deep breath. That's
Yeah.
just the way it works.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And this actually for me creates an awareness of how I have the opportunity to show up differently moving forward. So I always kind of think to myself, like we all know, if you're not in a good mood, you had a rough day at work, don't go play with your animals. Like that's a cardinal rule. But I also know for me, my turn off my mind, turn off my busyness and the mental chaos that perhaps I'm in, that always changes as soon as I head out to the field or I head to the barn. I've learned how to just set that aside and not have that play into our time together. But the awarenesses that were brought through recently through our conversation, and then I really thought about, I wonder what else might be energetically sitting in my being that's being picked up by whatever horse that is, and that then gets returned to me by whatever it may be. Maybe they're having difficulty understanding. Maybe that's my hint, like perhaps you should ask differently. Or maybe the behavior comes through as a message to me to say, could you be curious that rather than you want it your way, perhaps there's another way? Or perhaps you're using uh, a language or wording or physical action that is incongruous with how the animal needs to receive it. And so a lot of what we went through yesterday really made me think a lot about that's really great that I think I know what I'm doing, but clearly they have a different idea. And how can I now be more open and spacious to consider, so what does this could this look like, how else might this look? So I think for the listeners, if I don't care, what kind of a pet you may share your time with, but the value in deepening your bond will not only deepen your bond with your animal companion, but I'm going to say it will reignite your bond to your soul, to your heart. It will, as we all know my phrase, It will help you walk home to your heart. It will help to bring awareness to perhaps some of the things that you think or thought you may have solved or resolved or worked through. And your companion, your furry, feathered, reptilian, whatever companion, is there to help you continue to walk your way home to your heart. I mean, I think that's really how it feels to me. Yeah.
I would agree with you. That is a beautiful way of putting it. And I feel once again, and I have two little examples, what, like how ease is part of that. So I remember my parents, they usually, when they come from Germany and visit, they are here for sometimes a month, sometimes they've been longer, which is a long time when you are suddenly with your parents back in your home. I remember one time, a week into their visit, our dog had diarrhea. And I was kind of like, he was laying on the sofa, and I'm like, Scouty, what is going on with you? What's up with your belly? And he just, as I'm petting him and I'm kind of doting over him, he just looked up and just looked at me. And I almost caught this little thing where he's like, is this really about me? And I went like, whoa, wait, what? And then I realized, oh my gosh, I had actually a little bit of a bellyache because I was not setting good boundaries with my mom in that case. And I was kind of like, oh my God, you're right. I am letting her schedule kind of manage my schedule. And I'm like, I need to stop that. So I said to him, forget about it. Thank you for carrying that for me, but I got it. Got it. I picked up on it and I will change it now and I will take responsibility for myself. And guess what? 2 days later, the belly ache was gone. And of course, we can say in those situations, oh my God, my poor dog, he's taking on everything. And I'm like, no, it's what he would do because I was vulnerable. I
Yeah.
was the one in this case who was vulnerable, having my space kind of, taken over a little bit. And that didn't feel congruent in my stomach. And so he picked up on it and he was just like, something to fix over there. And then the other part was one of my horses, my mare. I remember one day she was out in the yard and I had to go to a meeting and I had an extra 5 minutes and I was just kind of futzing around with her, petting her. And she stood like a sculpture, kind of, so almost barely breathing. And she is usually very responsive and she's like, oh, scratch me here or do this or do that. And so finally I said to her, what is up with you? You're standing here so weirdly. Are you okay? And then I realized, oh, I hadn't told her about this meeting that I was about to go into. And I always tell my animals what I'm about to do, where am I going, what's going on in their life. So I said to her, oh my God, I forgot to tell you, I'm going to this meeting. I'm not so sure. There's a project coming up. I'm not sure if I really think this is the right thing for me, but we'll see. And she says, and those were words again, she says, if it feels funny in the gut, turn around and walk away. And I went, oh, I'm like, well, duh, right? That's a great
Duh.
statement. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh my God, thank you. And in that moment, when it came, right, when my light bulb went on, she started, which horse people know what that means, but she started to go and blowing out through the nose and licking and chewing and da da da. And she started to soften up. And then she's like, and now you can scratch me here if you want. And I realized that my tension, back to what you were saying, my tension was reflected back through her as tension. She stood so stiffly. And I was like, again, she is looking for me to do the right thing for me. She wants me to be in my truth. And that's important to animals, right? That creates a congruence. And it was funny. The whole thing lasted for 3 months. And eventually I turned around and walked away. And that was the right choice to do. But, right, again, they are so tuned into us. And it's not something they do where I need to feel bad or guilty that they're taking on my stuff. It is more, they don't know any different. And my job is simply, when I notice it, to take responsibility, just like you decided, right? You're
Yes.
going to take responsibility.
Yes. So I know you have things to do, so we're going to kind of wrap this, and I'll tell you a little something that we refer to in numerology land. It's called the divine timing cycle. And so there's a series of windows that everybody goes through energetically in a cycle, and these cycles repeat throughout our lives and in various ways. And the cycles can be broken down into things like awareness, self responsibility, activation, and it goes through all these different stages till you ultimately come to transformation, and transmutation of energies. And so it's very interesting as I hear you speaking that the whole point of this reflection and the mirroring, and we see it in our animals, which is really a reflection of what is it doing within ourselves. And the key to making the shift, to shifting the energy, is exactly these first three initial steps in the divine timing cycle of awareness. I have an awareness, a clarity of, oh my gosh, the aha. I have the in the moment, being mindful and within the moment. And I have the capacity to own the self responsibility for what might I need to do next in order for me to move through this, whatever challenge, block, or otherwise. So I think it is just fascinating to me how true, and then the last thing I'll say is, or how authentic our animals are with us in our world. They don't carry a filter like humans do. They are just pure. They're through and
Yeah.
through clear and pure. They don't have ulterior motives. They just are. They are the essential expression of, in the moment, the masters in the art of being versus the art of doing, the expression of the ultimate in divine love. I mean, it's just it just, I'm in awe. I mean, I'm in daily awe of
Yeah.
how magnificent this availability is for us as humans as we struggle here in earth school.
Mhm.
How much easier could the journey be if we're willing to be aware, spacious, open, receiving, unconditional, and forgiving of ourselves predominantly. But it just is constantly a reminder how to walk home to your heart. And the answer is really kind of simple if you think about it. Not so easy all the time. Or maybe what's the phrase? It's easy but not simple. It's simple but not easy. I don't know what the phrase is. But you know what I'm saying? It's like you kind of go, duh. But yet we spend our whole lives struggling with the duh. You know, it's just kind of funny. But
Yeah.
I love this. Tell our listeners, where can they find you? And then I'm going to share a little funny tidbit before we jump off the air. But let our listeners know, where's the best place to find you?
The best way is probably my website, because there you can find all the information. You can reach out to me, and that is mindful, and then a hyphen, and then connections. It's a plural, S at the end.com. And yeah, that's where, you can reach out and check in. That's where you find my books, and my podcast is there. And as you mentioned, I do ceramic art. I create what I call mugs on mugs. It's animal faces on ceramic mugs that I carve into ceramic. So that's the best way, mindful-connections.com.
I love it. I love it. And I will leave you with this little tidbit of, how do I feel like everything shows up when you need it, when it's meant to show up, if you just are receptive to the possibilities. I was connected to you through a mutual acquaintance. I have a friend who I said, oh, I had a great visit yesterday with Nicole, and this is what we did. And she said, oh, I want to talk to you about that. Jumped on the phone with her today, and I gave her your full name. Well, lo and behold, this friend of mine is the president of our local Vermont um, membership organization council here in the state that I live in. And she says, oh, well, I know who Nicole is. She actually came and did a talk for our group, whatever it was, a few years ago. And I'm thinking, oh, I must have missed the memo because I clearly missed that one. And then here we are a few years later in the roundabout, reconnected. And again, I always think, oh, universe, you're just so darn clever. I probably wasn't ready then, but I was ready now. And you were so gracious to hold on and bring Nicole into my world when I was ready. Thank you.
Oh my God. It's
I
like,
know.
I don't know if I can say it here, but I call this one of those you can't make this shit up moment.
You cannot make this shit up. I'm telling you, you so cannot. I mean, there's no way you could write down the order of things that have occurred in
No.
your life as if it was a GPS tracker. There is no way.
You
So
just gotta
things,
have faith in the universe. And
yes,
and if you
yes.
do, guess what? It all shows up, right?
It all shows up. It's
Oh.
beautiful. Oh my gosh, Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time today. This
Oh,
was so
I am
great.
just so, I mean, this is just so fun. And you are such an amazing podcaster and interviewer. So I thank you for having me. And
My
I can't wait
pleasure.
to connect or see how the universe connects us next time.